Here on BBC One now, Lynn Foleswood and John Stapleton test the metal and mechanics of the MOT on tonight's edition of Watchdog.
Hello and welcome once again to Watchdog. In this week's programme, the death trap still on the streets of Britain and why your MOT certificate of roadworthiness may not be worth the paper it's written on. And in our search to find the best of British, the jam that's been lovingly preserved since the First World War. But first, all of us want to protect our children against serious illness and disease. And most of us know the names of the diseases that might strike our youngsters down. Or at least we think we do. No doubt you've heard of meningitis, a potentially fatal illness you read about in the papers whenever there's an outbreak. But did you know there's another strain of meningitis which never hits the headlines, but's an even bigger killer? Well, there is. It's got a complicated medical name, but it's known for short as Hib. Lynn has been investigating.
Sarah Thompson was born on August the 10th, 1987, a delightful, happy baby. But 6 months later, she was dead.
She was lovely. I mean, she was super. Of my 3 children, she was the happiest and the healthiest and the least trouble.
Overnight, Sarah became ill, just running a temperature and being a little sick. Even their doctor thought it nothing dramatic. But the next morning, Sarah was in hospital, dying.
The hours that we spent in intensive care were the worst, were just a nightmare. She was lying in a cot and there were drips and monitors everywhere and wires. In a baby of that size, there's not really much skin for them to clip on their monitors. And I can remember trying to find a little bit of her skin to just stroke, and there really wasn't much left. They needed to do a brain scan to confirm what they already thought. It showed that she had extensive brain damage. She was brain dead.
The life support machine was switched off.
Well, the tube was taken from her throat and she was just handed back to me. And she was lovely. It was just as if she was asleep. And I just had her back in my arms and I could cuddle her and talk to her as she was dying. And I could say goodbye.
Andrew Ruane was 16 months old when he caught Hib. For 2 days, 2 GPs failed to recognise the early symptoms. A third doctor immediately rushed him to hospital.
We thought he was going to die. Well, we were told there wasn't much hope for him. He was so ill. He couldn't lift his head or anything. He was a completely different colour. He'd gone completely white. There wasn't a bit of colour in him. And
was that a terrible time for you?
Oh, it was, because I couldn't even pick him up. For 2 weeks, I could not touch him because he just screamed. We were very, very, very lucky. We didn't think he'd ever walk again. He's got loss of balance down one side, loss of hearing in one ear, and his speech is very behind.
Now 5 years old, Andrew goes to a special school. He has made dramatic improvements, but his family still don't know what his future might be.
Hib is a horrible disease affecting mainly children between the ages of 3 months and 5 years old. It kills 65 children a year and damages seriously another 150. What appalls baffles me as a mother of a very young child is I'd never even heard of this disease. I'll bet you haven't heard of it. Yet there's a solution, and we aren't going to be offered it for years.
If these children were in Finland or America, they would be protected from the disease, protected by a vaccine first developed in the 1970s and now being introduced in many other countries, but not in Britain. Surprising, because a team here at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford has played a crucial role in the international hunt for a vaccine. Research has found that vaccinating all our children would be cheaper than caring for the damage caused by Hib. So you might expect the Department of Health to be deeply involved in funding the Oxford work. In fact, the team have had to spend a lot of their valuable time raising most of the money themselves from the Medical Research Council, the Meningitis Trust and a drug company. 2 years ago, the team tested the vaccine on 100 babies of 3, 5 and 9 months old. The results could not have been better. Then the government changed their child immunisation programme, and all the tests had to be repeated on babies of 2, 3 and 4 months old. Yet more delays. Professor Richard Moxon, leading the research, believes the vaccine to be one of the safest ever developed. With other countries already immunising their children, why are we so far behind?
I'm afraid that in this country, our system for recognising important diseases and then the chain of events which leads to their prevention creaks and groans along because it's underfunded. We have excellent professionals, but we don't have enough of them. And we don't have the right resources often to be able to go through these steps.
So our children are suffering because our system isn't up to looking after them at the moment.
I think it's inevitably true that the longer an effective vaccine is delayed, its implementation is delayed, the more children there will be who will die or become disabled needlessly.
Professor Moxon will know the final results of his tests in December. Even if they're as good as he believes they will be, the vaccine still has to be licensed and the money found for a vaccination programme to begin. Why does it all have to take so long? Why can't we learn from the success of Finland and America? We asked the Department of Health. They told us,
whilst Finnish results are encouraging, it is important to confirm them in the UK. The Department of Health is funding a study of the 4 vaccines available elsewhere at a cost of £135,000.
That's a trifling amount when compared with the £1 million that Professor Moxon has had to raise privately to make his research possible.
We're not aware that lack of resources has prevented research in this field.
Perhaps not, but surely more investment at the research stage would have speeded up the introduction of a vaccination programme, saving lives and money.
Well, prevention of disease is in fact extremely cost-effective. Treatment of established diseases and their consequences is very expensive. So one needs to make the investment, and I think that this is an extremely important point that we've been slow to recognise in this country.
So when will the government be protecting our children?
It is unlikely that such a programme could be introduced before 1992 or 93.
The most difficult thing to understand is that she was sitting with me one evening having her tea quite normally, and 24 hours later she was lying in intensive care on a ventilator and brain dead.
According to the Department of Health, a vaccination programme could be introduced in the next 2 or 3 years. But if past experience with other diseases is anything to go by, it will in fact take much longer than that. On Thursday, there's an international conference on Hib taking place in Oxford. And on Friday, the Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunisation will be discussing the problem. We hope they decide to speed up approval of the vaccine. Meanwhile, if you want to know more about the symptoms of Hib meningitis, send a stamped addressed envelope to the Meningitis Trust, Fern House, Bath Road, Stroud, Gloucestershire.
weeks ago, we investigated the damaging side effects of the vitamin niacin, taken in high doses to lower blood cholesterol. We're pleased to say the vast majority of it has been taken off the shelves. Now it seems food manufacturers are taking advantage of our concerns about cholesterol and heart disease with some pretty clever packaging. Take a look at this packet. Now what does that suggest to you? That it's good for your love life? Well, take a look at the back. A heartbeat and lots of information about how to lower your cholesterol and avoid heart disease. You could well be forgiven for thinking that these flakes are good for your heart. Well, oats may help your heart in some ways, but there's no way you'd significantly reduce your risk of heart disease with a bowl full of these. That is common sense. Kellogg's say they make it clear their flakes can only help your heart as part of a low-fat diet. They do, but down here, on the back. But it's the front of the packet that sells. So manufacturers tend to heavily promote one good thing about their product on the front while pushing all the not-so-good things into the small print on the back. It can be very misleading. This kind of labelling is called highlighting by the industry, and it's everywhere. Take these crisps, for example. They claim to be low in cholesterol. They may well be, but claims about the amount of cholesterol in food isn't much help to most of us. It's your fat intake that affects your blood cholesterol. The cholesterol you eat is largely irrelevant. And in fact, this is still a relatively high-fat food and isn't going to stave off heart disease. Sainsbury's say their packet isn't misleading and is within the current laws. And it's not only heart claims that manufacturers are making a meal of. These peas are big on the fact that they contain no preservatives. Well, of course they don't. No canned food does. The canning process itself preserves the food. What they do contain are colours and flavourings, and you don't see them boasting about that. Farrow's told us they did it all to educate us, but now they've decided we've got the message and they've changed the label. But the old can still appears to be widely available. Under current laws, there's nothing to stop manufacturers using these marketing techniques, so the consumer is only getting partial information. It's not balanced and it's not accurate. There's a simple solution proposed by the Coronary Prevention Group. They suggest that every product lists whether it contains high, medium or low amounts of the various food groups, good and bad. The Co-op already use a similar scheme. Wouldn't it be nice if other supermarkets followed suit? At least then you'd know exactly what you were picking up from the supermarket shelves.
In August this year, Jane Prowse and 8 others paid out £1,500 each for what they hoped would be the holiday of a lifetime. They travelled to Newfoundland in Canada to see at close quarters one of the largest creatures in the world, the humpbacked whale. These magnificent animals gather off the coast of Newfoundland during the summer to feed. Their playful displays rank as one of nature's most spectacular sights. The company offering the holiday, Arctic Experience of Banstead, Surrey, believe it to be the best holiday of its type in the world. Their brochure, showing dramatic pictures of humpback whales, describes how thousands of great whales come to the spectacular bays of eastern Newfoundland during the summer. What did the group feast their eyes on? Well, they saw empty sea, plenty of that. And what of the animals they travelled all that way to see, the humpbacks? Their entire sightings of humpbacks lasted about 15 minutes. They also saw a number of these smaller minke whales, but they're shy and solitary, and unlike the humpbacks, they shun human contact. Hardly worth travelling halfway around the world to see them. Of course, you can't guarantee nature, but Watchdog's seen the records of the company operating the Canadian end of the tour. They show that only 2 humpbacks have been spotted over the whole of the previous 5 years in the same week that Jane and her party visited. By the time the group arrived in August, the whales had begun to migrate southwards. Arctic Experience didn't think Jane had a valid complaint. We got in touch with them and they agreed to look at it again. They pointed out to us that they had no intention to mislead, but said the brochure may have unintentionally given the impression that seeing great whales meant only seeing humpbacks. They've now agreed to give each of the group a £500 refund and to change the brochure for next year. So if you're planning to go on a wildlife holiday, do check the wildlife is going to be there. Now, do you remember last week we asked you to watch out for these things, a device for keeping tabs on your child in crowded places? Well, after the programme, we heard of a horrifying accident that happened to this little girl, 3-year-old Claire Astles from Norwich in Cheshire. A few weeks ago, Claire's family was on holiday in Blackpool. Claire's mother, Catherine, pressed the button of the old-fashioned hotel lift. Now, Claire was wearing one of these. It's a clip-a-safe hand holder. Mother Care sell a very similar one. Her mum opened the door of the lift and helped Claire inside. She took off her hand holder and gave it to Claire to hold while she lifted the baby in the pushchair into the lift. But Claire dropped the end of the wristband, which slipped through a gap at the bottom of the lift door. As the lift went up, Claire was dragged down by the arm. Her hand was pulled through the gap, and then her arm. When Catherine Astles realised, she pressed the emergency button. The lift stopped at the first floor, and then it took the fire brigade over an hour to cut the little girl free. She was rushed to Booth Hall Children's Hospital in Manchester. Now, I must warn you, the picture of Claire's injury is horrible. She lost a lot of muscle and tissue, which needed hours of skin grafting. Her arm was severely fractured and had to be pinned and plated. Well, Clip-A-Safe say that they're very sorry to hear about the tragic incident, and this is the first time anything like this has happened. I would certainly not use any of these devices for my 3-year-old because I think they give a false sense of safety, and I don't think they should be on sale. If you have one of these for your child, please do watch out.
Every year, more than 5,000 people are killed on the roads of Britain. With such an appalling death toll as that, you would think that everything's being done to ensure that all vehicles are roadworthy. But is it? Only last week, a major initiative to tighten the laws on the sale of old bangers ran out of parliamentary time. And as Bill Hanrahan found out, that's not just a shame, it has terrifying implications for every one of us.
Motor Trade Consumer Protection Bill Law, second reading.
Objection. An empty chamber hears an attempt to prevent death on the road. One word, object, and a bill which took 2 years to draft is stalled. It was the intention of the bill to prevent the sale of cars like this. Now, these cars were bought from garage forecourts throughout Birmingham. They all had MOTs, and yet they're all unroadworthy. As the law stands, you or I could go into any forecourt of any garage throughout Britain and buy a car just like this, a potential death trap. And what was wrong with this one?
You open the door, just take a look inside, you'll see that the seat, it just comes out.
This is how the car was sold. This car was sold with an MOT.
It was, yeah, but there's another one over here if you'd like to have a look.
These cars may be duff, but they were all sold with an MOT. Trading standards officers bought them to keep them off the road. The poll taxpayers of Birmingham footed the bill. What's wrong with this car?
As you can see, there's a big hole here in the floor which my fingers pop through, and you see them waggling there.
But there's no way this car could have got an MOT with that, is there?
This vehicle was sold with a 6 months MOT.
Well, who's to blame? The person who sold it or the person who bought it?
Obviously the person who sold it. You can't possibly blame the person that bought the vehicle.
Because it had an MOT?
Because it had a current MOT certificate with it, which to all intents and purposes they think the vehicle is in a roadworthy condition.
Thank you, Tony. But they would be wrong. The test, introduced in 1960, was designed to keep unsafe cars off the road, but it's failing. A 12-month MOT certificate relates only to the condition of the testable items at the time of the test, so the car is deemed safe only on the day of the checks. What's more, it relies heavily on the interpretation of the tester. If he is less than thorough, dangerous cars slip through the net. To show just how easy it is for a dangerous car to get through a test and onto the streets, we selected at random this Birmingham garage and sent in 2 trading standards officers. Remember, all of these cars will be sold with an MOT certificate. The officers were worried about several cars, but one in particular caught their attention.
In a door. Look at that, really nice big hole in the floor. Just put my finger through it. Yes. It's had some work done on it, a bit of patching. Oh, knackered. Yeah, there's a big hole in the rear floor. Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely knackered.
The 2 men have spotted several holes in the bodywork, some of them in main load-bearing parts of the vehicle. In a crash, it would offer little protection.
No two ways about it, it would appear to be unroadworthy.
As the law stands, unless the trading standards officers can buy the car, they have to walk away, leaving unroadworthy vehicles to the untrained eye of the car buyer. Like me.
Well, yeah, it is really.
I know very little about cars, but I'm reassured that this one will have an MOT certificate.
5 months MOT on it. Is there anything wrong with it?
No, it's fine. It belongs to your phone.
Could well be ready for this evening, but you don't know what you find until you're taken for MOT.
Oh, right.
You have to do what they tell you to do.
Yeah.
Can you get it ready? I should think so. Yeah.
Now I'm convinced it will have an MOT, so I leave a deposit.
You know, I'll need to know. Oh yeah, you want to watch that?
The finishing touches to make sure the deal goes through. Overnight, the garage has done the work needed for the car to pass an MOT.
They're okay because it's just gone through the MOT. Yeah. And they wouldn't pass it unless they was all right. They're so fussy up there.
So the money changes hands. There are 32 separate checks covered by the MOT certificate. If the car has failed on any one of them, it should not be on the road.
Well, I bought my car. It may only have been £650, but I do have this. It's a 12-month MOT certificate dated from today, which from the customer's point of view means the car's safe. We're not so sure, so we're going to take it to an independent vehicle inspector. Because it may be unroadworthy, we're technically not allowed to drive it. So we've had to find another way of getting it to the test bay.
When the independent tester examined the car, he was shocked. Pat Barnes put the car through a resit of its MOT test.
You can see the hole right the way through at the side of the chassis member there. And obviously this could have been seen at the time it was MOT'd from the underside. Now, the brake pipes here should be connected by clips to the chassis frame, one clip there and one clip there. They're just floating about anywhere, and that could foul any object thrown up from the road, which if that pipe was severed, you'd obviously lose foot brake action on the rear wheels.
On this side, the lower mounting point for the seat belt is quite loose in the sill mounting. As you can see, it's all moving around. Again, that's an item that should have been picked up on the MOT.
Pat, you've seen the car. What's your verdict?
Well, it should not have passed an MOT. It's a very poor example of an Escort. And quite frankly, the state that it's in, it just isn't worth buying to use on the road because the cost of rectifying it properly would far exceed its market value.
We took the car to the mechanics who earlier that day had given it an MOT. Our test had showed 4 defects. Each should have ruled out an MOT pass. We pointed out the problems.
How would you explain the time gap between this morning when you passed it and now when you probably fail it?
Yeah. I can't. As simple as that. There's no way you can. I can say, why is the seatbelt loose now? Why is the seat loose? Well, without checking my paperwork, which we register everything on the VT30s. Whatever I've written on there, I can't remember exactly what I've written down. But obviously you can remember certain cars. It's this morning, you can remember it.
The fact is that you'd fail it now, wouldn't you?
Seatbelt, yes, for being loose, which I did initially. Battery now, as I said. Brake pipe, yes. Why it's loose, I don't know. Whether I did miss it, I can't be 100% sure on that.
Even the tester agreed my car should have failed its MOT. But the man who sold it to me, Mr. Webb, refused to give me my money back. His conscience was clear.
We came back to the garage to give Mr. Webb the chance to put his side of the story. He declined. It will make me look like a shady car dealer, he said. And he insists he isn't a shady car dealer. After all, he sold a car with a full 12-month MOT.
Each year, 14 million cars face an MOT test. Clearly, passing that test doesn't guarantee roadworthiness, which was the original intention when it was introduced. Perhaps if the MOT system was a car, by now it would have been written off.
Bill, what does the Department of Transport say about all this?
Well, the Department of Transport seems quite happy with the MOT system at the moment. It points out that it's a cost-effective way of ensuring that a car meets its legal and safety requirements. What's more, they say that car was sold as an unroadworthy vehicle and it shouldn't have been sold as such. And they point out that the man who gave it an MOT certificate has now had his authority withdrawn.
And, of course, they withdraw the authority of a lot of other people to do that throughout the course of the year.
About 400 people had their authority to test withdrawn this year.
Now, I mentioned at the beginning there was a parliamentary initiative to tackle this problem. It ran out of time. What would that have done? What would that have changed?
It would have ended an anomaly. At the moment, trading standards groups can't go on to a garage forecourt and say to a salesman, withdraw that vehicle, it may have an MOT, but it's dangerous. The bill was drafted with the AA in mind to actually make sure that a trading standards officer would have the opportunity to go on and simply order a dangerous vehicle taken from sale.
For the time being, at least that won't happen. We'd better tell them what happened to the car you bought.
Here it is. It's a nice little runner. Obviously, we wanted to make sure that it didn't reach the streets, so we've decided to crush it. It now has a value of £20 scrap.
Bill, thanks very much indeed. And before we go, let me introduce you to yet another remarkable piece of British technology, the Goblin Wizard. As you can see, it still whizzes around the carpet and is among the latest nominations in our Best of British contest. The Wizard is owned and used by Mr. Henry Field, who lives at Burheath in Surrey. It was made by the Goblin Company, who are still going strong, back in 1930. It cost just £5, 19 shillings and sixpence, which 60 years on has got to be great value for money. And so too has this delightful little egg whisk, which was picked up for just a few pence even earlier, nearly 70 years ago, sometime in the 1920s. It's owned by Grace Hardesty from Ormskirk in Lancashire. Grace is 73 and remembers her mother using it when she, Grace that is, was just a slip of a girl. It's called the Probus, was patented by a family called Probert, and Grace is so fond of it that she only lent it to us on the strict understanding that we send it back before she bakes some more cakes. This toaster is, by comparison, a mere youngster, just 40 years old. It was picked up in a jumble sale by Mrs. Ethel Francis from Margate in Kent. And unlike all the modern ones that Lynn and I buy, this one actually works. A tribute to the skill of a Birmingham company called Premier Electric Heaters, who've since been taken over by Hotpoint. And finally, a truly historic moment in television history. The grand opening of Florence Kite's Jam. Now, Florence, bless her, is 90 years old, and she inherited this tin of Hartley's Black Currant from her mother, who kept it in her larder all through the 1914-18 war. Mrs. Kite Sr. never opened it because she always made her own jam, and Florence has never bothered either. So, with Florence's full approval, we are going to break the seal, or at least we're going to try to. And to do that, well, what else but a can opener that was also around during the First World War. It's owned by Roy and Carol Arter from Cinderford in Gloucestershire, who inherited it from Roy's dad, a 1914-18 veteran who used it all over the world. So bear with me. Here goes. I'll try my best. No, let's just have a smell of it anyway. It's in there.
I think I need a gas mask to smell it.
Go on, what do you think?
Actually, it still smells like fruit.
Does it really? Well, we're certainly not going to eat it, I'll tell you. We'll try some scones instead, shall we? And that's it for this week. Don't forget, on Watchdog, your trouble is our business. So if you have a problem, don't hesitate to either give us a call or drop us a line. Our address and hotline phone number will be on your screen in just a moment.
Until the same time next week, from John, from me, and from all the team, bye-bye.